Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
Humanitarian aid needs to get in at pace. The current situation in which we're seeing bombardment, including of children, and the prospect of starvation, it is just intolerable.
Keir Starmer made ending anti-Semitism in the Labour Party a core part of turning the page on Jeremy Corbyn's era. And the Prime Minister has supported Israel's right to defend itself. But now his view has changed.
Hello, you're listening to Bloomberg UK Politics. I'm Caroline Hepker.
And I'm James Woolcock. Many of the public will look back on this week as one where Starmer changed his mind. He U-turned on winter fuel allowances for pensioners and also shifted his stance on a youth migration scheme with the EU.
But it's on Israel that we want to linger today. The Labour Party leader has staunchly backed the country ever since he took over from Jeremy Corbyn. Indeed, Prime Minister Keir Starmer expelled Corbyn from the party in a bid to rid Labour of accusations of anti-Semitism.
Which makes it all the more dramatic, Caroline, that this week he denounced Israel alongside Canada's leader Marc and France's Emmanuel Macron. Starmer then found himself being accused of inciting anti-Semitism by none other than Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
I say to President Macron, Prime Minister Carney and Prime Minister Starmer, when mass murderers, rapists, baby killers and kidnappers thank you, you're on the wrong side of justice. You're on the wrong side of humanity. And you're on the wrong side of history.
So what has made Starmer change his mind this week?
Well, joining us now is our EMEA News Director, Rosalind Mathieson, and our Bloomberg opinion columnist, Marc. Welcome to both of you, and thank you for being with us. Marc, can I start with you? It's 19 months since the Hamas attack on Israel. Israel has barred aid into Gaza for nearly 3 months. It's back to some trucks returning to the territory. What is happening now in this conflict?
Well, essentially you had a winding down some months ago. And what has changed now is that, first of all, in March, the Israelis decided to blockade further aid going into Gaza. And then more recently, they've announced an expansion of the conflict, and they've said that they're going to move in, clear population into so-called safe zones, and then deal once and for all with Hamas. And it's this expansion of the war that has, combined with the blockade that came before, it's that has really turned, Israel's traditional allies, many of them, against it. They simply don't see the value of continuing the war, and they object very strongly to the way in which it's being conducted.
Ros, Marc there mentioned that there's been a sort of shifting position some of Israel's allies. Where are we seeing that, and why is it happening, particularly this year?
Well, it's largely happening because humanitarian aid was cut off for a number of months and is slowly resuming a little bit, and the concerns have largely been around the humanitarian situation inside Gaza, rising evidence of extreme hunger and so on. And so the argument from European leaders, Starmer included, is, whatever's happening in the war, we cannot shut off aid to the people who are still living inside Gaza. And that seems to have really escalated the rhetoric, and also just the signals from Israel that Benjamin Netanyahu is determined to push on with this war again in a very full-throated way. He's talking about essentially flattening Gaza, or what's left of it, and just continuing and perhaps even increasing the war again militarily on the ground, because he says that he still sees his goal as eradicating Hamas once and for all. So it seems to be both the escalation again of the fighting, the sense that Israel is going to push on quite heavily militarily, at some point perhaps an even more significant ground movement of troops back into Gaza, and the worsening humanitarian situation, and the concern that this conflict is going on with no perceived end in sight.
In terms of Prime Minister Keir Starmer and Emmanuel Macron and Marc Carney over in Canada, I mean, Israel has accused them of rewarding Hamas effectively, is what the Israeli Prime Minister said. I mean, supporters of the Palestinian people will say that this is long overdue, that they actually said something. I suppose my question really, maybe Marc, you can answer this, why now? And is this really a significant shift in terms of Israel's Western allies?
I think it is significant. I think that we've reached a point. I mean, there have been for a long time. There's been criticism of some of Israel's European allies for not doing more that's concrete in order to put pressure on the Israelis to abide by ceasefires. And to get the correct amounts of aid in. I think it is changing now. Part of it is that the language that Netanyahu and some of his cabinet ministers are now using to describe their goals for the war is it is openly stating what Israel was being accused of by its critics before. So Netanyahu has recently said, we are going to reoccupy Gaza for the indefinite future. So it's openly talking about occupation, also talked about clearing, cleansing, the territory. He was talking about Hamas, but the language is quite disturbing. And his finance minister, Bezalel Smotrich, has gone even further and talking about how we need, the territories have been conquered. So it's a change of approach, or a kind of open acknowledgement of the Israeli approach that makes it very difficult, actually, for allies to say, okay, we back you 19 months after this terrible terrorist attack. We still back you, when what you're saying is we want the long-term occupation, we want to flatten it, and talking about cleansing the territory. So I think this is what has changed. It's just the clarity on the Israeli side has made it very difficult for Western leaders to continue backing Netanyahu.
So, Ros, this shift in sort of the global position towards Israel, will this have any effect on the country or on Netanyahu?
Well, that's the big question, because arguably he is ever more isolated. I mean, you do have the position shift really in the UK from Keir Starmer, who, as Marc was saying, was working really hard to show that the Labour Party is not anti-Semitic, but at a point where, they really have to be much more critical of Israel over Gaza and the humanitarian situation there, in lockstep with other leaders in Europe and beyond. But the question is, what impact does that have? Because Benjamin Netanyahu seems very determined, for what it's worth, in terms of his agenda, and also in the face of, it seems, the US president washing his hands of Israel a little bit. You can see the relationship cooling between Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu, the frustration, because Donald Trump wanted a ceasefire that stuck in Gaza. He wanted this to come to a close. And the sense now is that, if anything, Israel is escalating again militarily. And so you can see from Donald Trump's visit to the region last week, he didn't go to Israel. He didn't see Benjamin Netanyahu. He's simply saying, you sort it out, I'm leaving you to it. And so, compounded, what does that do? Does Benjamin Netanyahu, feeling that sense of isolation, really double down and say, well, I'm going to go it alone, and I'm going to push on either way? And does that also lead him beyond Gaza, potentially, to take some kind of preemptive action against Iran? So it's not just Gaza here now, it's the question of what also does he do potentially with Iran?
Yeah, immensely dangerous when you're talking about nuclear facilities in Iran. Marc, just in terms of what the international community, though, can do here, in terms of an alternative solution to this war on Hamas in Gaza, and trying to have some impact on the situation, as we know, and as Ros was mentioning there, President Trump was in the Middle East, did not go to Israel, and was focused on signing big deals with Saudi Arabia and UAE, not on the deaths in Gaza.
Yes, that's absolutely true. But I think the kind of sad part of this is that it is a propitious time to get a wider deal in the region. But everything really hinges on the Israelis changing their policy in Gaza and creating some kind of, instead of pointing their process towards occupation and attempts to clear the Palestinians out, which are always going to be unacceptable politically for the leaders in the region. They have no choice but to reject that. But they are offering to get involved. The Saudis, the UAE, Egypt, they've got a plan. They're offering to get involved in reconstruction. They're saying, their plan would bring the Palestinian Authority into Gaza to, take over from Hamas. Hamas has been willing to talk, but nothing has really, gone very much further because the Israelis are in control and basically unwilling. And the larger part of this is that any solution that leaves the Palestinians where they are ultimately returns to the question of a two-state solution, which is still, the default position of the international community. But it is something that Netanyahu, and in particular some of the parties in his coalition, are absolutely opposed to, and those his coalition partners have made it very clear that anything that smacks of ending the war and moving towards a two-state solution would cause them to collapse the government. And that's a large part of why we are stuck exactly where we are.
And Marc, 2 Israeli embassy staff were killed in Washington, D.C. this week. There have been fears of the violence spilling over in communities outside of Israel and Palestinian territories too.
Yes, I mean the violence as it continues. History suggests that this kind of violence will not stay just within Gaza. It will recruit for Hamas and other groups that are, extremist groups that are dedicated to the destruction of Israel. It will recruit for them in the West Bank, within Israel, and, perhaps elsewhere. We don't know a lot about the perpetrator of this, or the suspected perpetrator of these murders in Washington. But it is a risk that is there. And it is, let's hope it doesn't happen, but history suggests that it's almost inevitable.
Yeah, indeed. Let's definitely hope for that. Ros, just bringing it back to what's happening here in the UK, obviously this is also being closely watched in Britain. What do you think Keir Starmer's position is going to be going forwards? It is just an immensely difficult issue, this long-running conflict in the Middle East, but it has implications for the UK.
Well, it does, and as you were just talking about this since the war started, and obviously beginning again with the Hamas attack on Israel, we've seen episodes periodically of violence in a number of countries, including here in the UK, and we've seen tension over not just the Jewish community but also the Islamic community here, and so it's a very delicate one for societies everywhere. But it'll be interesting to see how it resonates for Keir Starmer, because in a way you might see a little bit of the, we criticise our Prime Minister, but if you come for our Prime Minister, you come for us in this. And really that very strong language from Benjamin Netanyahu, accusing the leader of the UK and other countries of saying you're on the wrong side of justice because, if baby killers are supporting you, for example. I mean, that kind of language may actually serve to, bring some support to Keir Starmer on this again, that He's walking a very delicate line, as we know, and he's walked it for a while, and he's obviously still trying to show support for Israel's right to defend itself and to defang any anti-Semitic, elements within his party. But also, he's probably going to bring some support for his stance of being quite critical over the latest humanitarian situation, and you can see that potentially happening also.
Our EMEA News Director Rosalind Mathieson and our International Affairs columnist Marc Champion, thank you very much for joining us.
That's it from us for today. If you like the programme, don't forget to subscribe and give it 5 stars so that other people can find it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify or wherever you listen.
Our audio engineer was Sean Guastamacchia. I'm James Woolcock.
And I'm Caroline Hepker. We'll be back with more next week. This is Bloomberg.